disturbance in St. Mary's churchyard in Bloomsbury. An elderly person having hysterics. Quite respectable and locally known, and doesn't touch the gin. Husband was temperance before he died. Never been a nuisance in the past." "Perhaps she's ill," Pitt suggested. "Doesn't need more than a constable, does it? Maybe a doctor." "Well, sir..." Stripe looked distressed. "Seems her dog ran away and found this parcel in the bushes, and she thought it was part of a person. That's what gave her hysterics." "What on earth do you mean, part of a person?" Pitt demanded irritably. He liked young Wilberforce Stripe. He was normally keen and reliable. This vague story was unlike him. "What's in this parcel?" "Well, that's it, Mr. Pitt, sir. The constable on the beat says he hasn't touched it more than necessary afore you get there, sir. But by his reckoning, that's just what it is. A part of a woman's body. He was clearly embarrassed. He didn't wish to be indelicate, yet he was aware that a policeman should be precise. He placed one hand across his waist and the other across his neck. "The top half, sir." Pitt stood up, papers cascading off his lap onto the floor and remaining there. In spite of his 17 years in London, where the sumptuous and elegant heart of the empire disported itself a stone's throw from slums that teemed with poverty so intense, rotting tenements stood stacked against each other, 15 people to a room living and dying together, he had not ceased to be shocked by the savagery of crime. He could not grasp the mass, the mind refused, but the pain of the individual still had power to move him. "Then we'd better go and see," he replied, ignoring the disarray around him, and leaving his hat on the stand where he had thrown it on arriving in the morning. "Yes, sir." Stripe fell in behind him, following Pitt's familiar dishevelled figure along the corridor, down the steps past several other constables, and into the hot and dusty street. An empty hansom clattered past them, not believing Pitt, with his coat-tails flapping and his tie askew, to prove a likely fare. Stripe, in uniform, wasn't even worth considering. Pitt waved his arm and ran a few steps. "Cabby!" he shouted, his anger directed not at the personal slight, but against all crime in general, and this one he was going to pursue in particular. The cabby drew rein and looked at him with disfavour. "Yes, sir." "St. Mary's churchyard, Bloomsbury." Pitt scrambled in and held the door for Stripe behind him. "Would that be the east side or the west side?" the cabby inquired. "The back gate off the avenue," Stripe put in helpfully. "Thank you," Pitt acknowledged. Then to the cabby, "Get on with it, man." The cabby flipped the whip and made encouraging sounds, and they moved off, rapidly increasing to a trot. They rode in silence, each absorbed in his own speculations as to what they might find. "This here where you want to be, sir?" The cabby leaned down and asked dubiously. "Yes." Pitt had already seen the little knot of people and the harassed constable in the middle. It was an ordinary, rather seedy suburban churchyard. Dusty, grass dry with the summer heat, gravestones uneven and ornate, marble angels, and over on the right, before the yew trees, a clump of dark laurels. He climbed out, paid the driver, then crossed the pavement, and spoke to the constable, who was obviously overwhelmed with relief to see him. "What have you got?" Pitt asked dourly. The constable jerked his elbow towards the high spiked railings, but didn't turn his head. His face was pale, and there was a heavy beading of sweat on his lip and across his brow. He looked wretched. "Top half of a woman's body, sir." He swallowed hard. "Pretty horrible it is. It was under them bushes." "Who found it, and when?" "Mrs. Ernestine Peabody, out walking her Pekingese dog by the name of Clarence." He glanced down at his notebook. Pitt read from it upside down. 15th of June, 1887, 3:25 p.m. Called to St. Mary's churchyard, woman screaming. "Where is she now?" Pitt asked. "Sitting on this seat in the church vestibule, sir. She's took pretty bad, and I said as soon as you'd spoke to her she could go home. It's my opinion, sir, she won't be much use to us." "Probably not," Pitt agreed. "Where is this parcel?" "Where I found it, sir. I didn't touch it more than to make sure she wasn't having delusions like. On the gin." Pitt went over to the gates, heavy wrought iron and stuck fast, a little over a foot apart, wedged in the ruts of the dried mud. He squeezed through and walked along the inside of the railing till he came to the laurel bushes. He knew Stripe was immediately behind him. The parcel was about 19 inches square, lying where Clarence had left it, paper torn, and pulled away to expose the meat-like flesh and several inches of fine-grained white skin smeared a little with blood. There were flies beginning to gather. He didn't have to touch it to see that the portion showing was part of a woman's breast. He straightened up, feeling so sick he was afraid he was going to faint. He breathed deeply in and out, and heard Stripe blundering away, choking and retching behind a gravestone carved with cherubs. After a moment of staring at the dusty stones, the trodden grass, and the tiny yellow spots like pinheads on the laurel leaves, he forced himself to turn back to the dreadful parcel. There were details to note: the kind and colour of the paper, the twine that wound it, the type of knots. People left their mark, tied string loosely or tightly, length or width first, made slip knots, running knots, tied at each crossover, or merely looped, and there were a dozen different ways of finishing off. He blanked from his mind what was inside it, and knelt to examine it, turning it over gingerly when he had seen all he could from the top. It was thick paper, a little shiny on the inside, 2 layers of it. He had often seen such paper used for tying parcels of linen. It was strong and usually crackled a little if touched. Only this was wet with blood, and made no sound, even when he turned it. Inside the brown paper was clear, greased kitchen paper, another 2 layers, the sort butchers sometimes use. Whoever had wrapped this hideous thing must have imagined it would hold the blood. The string was unusual: coarse, hairy twine, yellow rather than white, wrapped lengthways and widthways twice, and knotted at each join, and finally tied with a loop and 2 raw ends about 1.5 inches long. He took out his notebook and wrote it down, though it was all something he would like to forget, wiped totally from his memory, if he could. Stripe was coming back, awkwardly, embarrassed by his loss of composure. He didn't know what to say. Pitt said it for him. "There must be more. We'd better organize a search." Stripe cleared his throat. "More? Yes, Mr. Pitt. But where should we start? Could be anywhere." "It won't be very far." Pitt stood up, knees stiff. "You don't carry that sort of thing longer than you have to. Certainly not further than you can walk. Even a lunatic doesn't get into a hansom or a public omnibus with a bundle like that under his arm. Should be within a radius of 1 mile at the outside." Stripe's brows went up. "Would he walk 1 mile, sir? I wouldn't. More like 500 yards, if that." 500 in each direction," Pitt answered. "Somewhere 500 yards from here." He waved his arm round the compass. "In each?" Stripe's blue eyes were confused. Pitt put the thought into words. "Must be a whole body altogether. That's about 6 parcels, roughly this size. He couldn't carry them all at once, unless he used a barrow, and I doubt he'd draw attention to himself by doing that. He certainly wouldn't be likely to borrow one, and who owns barrows except tradesmen and costers? But we'll check for any seen in this area, either yesterday or today." "Yes, sir." Stripe was intensely relieved to have something to do. Anything was better than standing there helplessly while the flies buzzed round the appalling heap in the grass. "Send a message back to the station that we need 6 constables, and the mortuary cart, and the surgeon." "Yes, sir." Stripe forced himself to look down once more, perhaps because he felt somehow callous, disregarding the enormity of it, walking away without some acknowledgement. It was the same instinct that makes one take off one's hat at the sight of a hearse passing in the street, even though one has no idea who is dead. Pitt walked between the gravestones, curled and decorated.